The format for our event today will allow each panelist to share their unique perspective and experience with gaining leadership approval for new projects or ideas. Before we start with our panelists, I'd like to introduce myself and Prior Learning Solutions. If you're not familiar with me, if we haven't had a chance to have a conversation, I am a continuous learner, and I really feel engaged and empowered learning from the experience and wisdom of other people in my network, as well as sharing my experience gained from over 20 years in sales, marketing, and operations management. Much like our topic today, I work with HR, learning and development, and compliance teams to gain leadership buy-in for customized learning programs designed to meet strategic goals with measurable results. Whether you need assistance in tailoring a proposal to leadership for your new learning ideas, self-directed employee learning program within your organization, increased retention, or leadership development, Prior Learning Solutions is here to provide the training you need and the support you want for yourself and your organization. Our first panelist today is going to be Alan Roscoe. He is currently the Learning and Development Manager for the Global Commercial Division of SC Johnson. He has over 25 years of experience in roles supporting and aligning talent with strategic business objectives, providing human capital management, human resources, organizational development, and training support in complex and matrixed environments. Specialty areas include leadership development, coaching, and learning program management. Alan resides in North Bay, Wisconsin, and is an avid world traveler, active cyclist, and chief enthusiast. Alan, would you like to take it away from here?
Wow, it's amazing how bios can actually make you sound smart. So nice to be able to write that down. So thanks, Nicole. Depending on where you're at in the United States, out west, it's still probably a good morning in Mountain and West time, and out east, good afternoon, and here in the great Midwest, a good afternoon to everybody. So thanks for a few minutes of your time. Appreciate you joining. I was able to join one of the journey development conversations a month or so ago, and it was really nice just to sit back and listen to some of the best practices out there, and looking forward to hearing from Carmel and Chris as well, and some of their experiences. So when I think about building that leadership buy-in, I think of, in many ways, kind of the art of higher level partnerships. And I think elevating relationships, whether it's with direct reports, peers, or in this case, you know, a one-up or something like that, it's not something you do, okay? I don't think that's where it starts. I think it's a result of everything that you've done. And where I think it really starts is with yourself. And I like to think of it more from a mirror and window perspective. And sometimes we get caught up in gaining that leadership buy-in because we're enthralled by the title or the opportunity to showcase ourselves in front of senior leadership and things like that. And that's great. That's your motivation. But I think if you really, really want to develop leadership buy-in, it starts with you. And I think it starts with your emotional intelligence. And there are a few perspectives and models of emotional intelligence out there. And I tend to subscribe to the model that starts with self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. And when it comes to leadership buy-in, it starts with you looking in the mirror and looking at yourself, who you are, what you do, how you do it. That's the self-awareness. How you respond to situations, that's your self-management. And then the outward-looking part of emotional intelligence is social awareness and relationship management. And so I think as you strive to build leadership buy-in for a project, a business case, an opportunity, it starts with you. And the other piece of that I really believe in is in how you're received, especially by leadership, comes from how you build your brand. And I believe that your brand is built first and foremost in trust. And I subscribe very much to, and there are many concepts of trust out there. It's not that one is better than the other, but really believe in the concepts forwarded by Stephen M.R. Covey in his Leading at the Speed of Trust. And that trust is based first and foremost in your competence and your character. And for those of you not familiar with the model, there's a great visualization that they do in terms of what that looks like, and they use a tree. And so your competence is what people see. So that's the trunk and the branches and the leaves and everything that we see. That's the above ground. And that's oftentimes what your senior leaders will see. And that may be, in some cases, really what they're looking for from you. What are your results and what are your capabilities? Okay, and so that's the competence approach. And that's necessary to obtain leadership buy-in, because if they don't think you're capable of it, or if they haven't seen your results, it's a lot harder to sell and gain that leadership buy-in, okay? But it's more than that. And below the ground, the roots, okay, where your competence is really rooted, is your character. And that is your intent and your integrity. And while you might be able to argue that all four of those components can be considered equal, I think the character piece carries a much greater weight. And what is your intent? What are you striving for? What are you looking to accomplish? What do you want to do? And what is your integrity? Okay. And so I think before you even set forth or take a step two and start actually interacting with the individuals that you're trying to get that leadership buy-in, you really have to look in the mirror. And it starts with you and your emotional intelligence and your brand, particularly around building trust. As that progresses, in adding in another Covey concept from the 7 habits, as you get into those conversations, it's a mindset approach. You notice I haven't even talked yet about have I got the data? Have I put the story together? Do I have a nice PowerPoint and things like that? There's still a bit of that self component to it and how you think about it. And mindset, one of the 7 habits, and Carol Dweck wrote a great book on mindset, which built on the mindset components of Stephen Covey, is what are you looking to accomplish here? And as you know, one of the other 7 habits is win-win. And so we spend a lot of time thinking about a transactional discussion. Do I have my data? Have I put together the right slides? And do I have all my facts and figures? And that's all important, believe me, okay? And I'll talk about that in a little bit. That's all very important. But if you approach the conversation, especially as you're attempting to get leadership buy-in, just strictly as a transactional discussion, and, oh, I got a yes, let me check the box, I can move on from here, then, yeah, you accomplished a task, but did you forge a higher level, longer term partnership? One that advances the goals of the organization, the goals of the individual you're speaking with, your goals, and even higher goals. And so it's taking it to a more of a win-win perspective. And there's a phrase that I heard, some time ago, and some people refer to win-win as third option thinking. There's a phrase that, for those of you, if you like it, I'll take full credit as actually quoting it. If not, I'll just say somebody else quoted it, because that's really where I got it, but I don't remember who. Is somewhere between right and wrong is a field, and I will meet you there. And so as you're preparing for and developing your thought process and thinking through these conversations and trying to establish leadership buy-in, are you coming at it from a win-win perspective? And as that builds on, and you think about building these relationships and forging partnerships, ultimately you're going to have some sort of a story that comes into play. And I think storytelling is where all of the previous stuff that I just talked about, the mindset and the trust and the building of the brand and emotional intelligence, is where it really comes about. And I think the art of storytelling is gaining more and more traction, not just in the ability to tell great selling stories, but externally to perhaps a buyer, but especially internally, in your ability to put that story together. I have an example I want to share about an experience I had some time ago with the individual who at the time was my people leader. And we were having conversations about a presentation that was going to be given to the chief operating officer of our organization. We really needed his buy-in. This was a big project. It was a signature event. It was a global event. And we really needed to establish his buy-in. And during this conversation, which was how I wanted to approach it, my people leader asked, if you walked out today and you ran into, insert name here, our chief operating officer, would you be prepared to talk to him, sell him, and tell him about our plan? I said, absolutely. I didn't even hesitate. I don't even think the period was on the end of his sentence before I said, absolutely. And then he said something very interesting. He said, but where's your PowerPoint deck? Where are your slides? Where is everything? And that was an aha moment for me, because I had noticed that the only way that this individual could establish and obtain leadership buy-in was in the formal, structured, planned, coordinated, organized meeting kind of mindset. If there wasn't a PowerPoint, if there weren't slides, if there weren't Excel files and things like that, he had a really difficult time obtaining leadership buy-in. Obviously, you need to know who your leader is, and you need to know their style. And yes, sometimes that's what they want. And that's part of your social awareness and relationship management is, I better have a deck together. I better have the data. I better have my slides and things like that, because there are some people who believe in God we trust, all others please provide data. So that's fine if that's their approach and that's their mindset. You just need to be prepared to evolve to what it is they're looking for. And so when I think of the other component of emotional intelligence about social awareness and relationship management, when I'm thinking about establishing leadership buy-in, I use a model, and it's an acronym. What call could not go on without an acronym? And the acronym is SAM. Some of you may have heard of it. It's SAM, and that's story, assumption, and math. Okay, all three of those components are generally involved in trying to get leadership buy-in. Okay, first of all, what's the story? What's the problem to solve? What are you striving for? What are you looking to get? Are you looking to get funding for something? Are you looking to get approval on a project? Are you looking to advance something? So what's your story? Okay, and it's your ability to drive that story with facts and figures, and sometimes just storytelling, okay, really sets the foundation for it, okay? Then you have to make some assumptions. Very rarely in any project program do we have 100% of the data 100% of the time. If you do, congratulations, and you probably win whatever it is you're going for from a leadership buy-in perspective. I myself, in my 25 plus years, have had varying experiences of going into trying to get leadership buy-in where I had perhaps more, than normal, but I still had to make some assumptions because I'm not Nostradamus and I can't read a crystal ball, and I'm not a futurist from that perspective, so I have to make some assumptions. And so, but those assumptions can be based in facts and say, because of this, I can make a solid fact-based assumption that we will go in this particular direction, okay? And then the math piece on this is monetizing, okay? Is in perhaps not every project, every program, or every effort at leadership buy-in that you're striving for is gonna have a heavy amount of math to it, but there's probably gonna be some facts because there's a cost. Nothing is free. There's a cost to everything. There's a time cost. There's a people cost. There's a personnel resource cost, and then of course there are financial costs. And so your ability to pull all that together and show, here's my story. I've made a few assumptions. If we do this, this is what it's going to cost. This is what we'll get, a return on investment and things like that. And so kind of pulling all of that together, starting, of course, with yourself in the mirror and looking at yourself from an emotional intelligence perspective, the brand that you build, and the trust that you build through your competence and your character, I think, ultimately then comes to life in a model that I subscribe to and I think has worked very well for me throughout my career when I'm trying to get that leadership buy-in, is to have a solid story backed up by facts and as needed assumptions, and then whatever math that will sell them on it. So I'm going to pause there and see how we're doing, Nicole, in your part. First of all, from a time perspective, I'm going to be mindful and respectful of my other colleagues and panelists, and if any questions that come in, or if we just want to pause on that until the other two panelists are complete. So I'm going to pause there and get any thoughts, feedback from you on how we're doing so far.
Awesome. We're doing great on time. If you had a few more comments or thoughts, you're welcome to share it, and then we'll proceed to the next. We're doing each panelist will speak and share their perspectives, and then we'll open up for questions just for the essence of time.
Okay, so thank you for that. And I only have just a couple of final closing comments, and looking forward to and would love to hear from Carmel and Chris, and then see how, if I have anything else that I want to build on. When I think about obtaining leadership buy-in, and sometimes perhaps this might come across as aspirational, because are there some people you're getting leadership buy-in and you go in, I want the facts, done, go. Here's your 5 minutes of fame and move on. I'm more optimistic of people leaders, especially higher level people leaders, that they want to engage their employees. They want to be seen as good partners with their employees. And so I don't want to be so futuristic or unrealistic that this works every single time and it's all blue sky and sunshine. But I think if you focus on a collaborative, facilitated type of discussion, you can facilitate and you can create better outcomes for both parties. And I think it comes down to focus on learning, focus on win-win, not just on a deal, because this is one of many conversations that you have and one of many interactions you have with your leaders throughout your organization. Be flexible, focus on goals, your goals, their goals, the broader organizational goals, again, that whole win-win type of approach. And this last piece comes about because it tends to fit my personality style, and which doesn't always go over well with some folks. And that's part of my responsibility to adapt or adopt to the people or people, the people or the person or persons that I'm interacting with. Is I look to try and create, whether it's one-on-one with a senior leader or in a group conversation trying to get broader leadership buy-in, is I like to keep the discussions fun. I like to keep them open. I like to keep them creative, honest, spacious, and especially safe. Because I think at the end of the day, nobody wants anyone to fail. And I think if you've got the broader interests of everybody in the room or the individual in the room in mind and the organization, that's a great opportunity for everybody to win. And in the end, experience is the greatest teacher we will ever have. Not Mrs. Jones from kindergarten. She may have helped you really along the way, but ultimately it's the experiences we have that help us. And I have had times where, I've tripped, fallen down, skinned my knees, and even, smashed my face on the ground. You get up, you dust yourself off, and you learn from it and you move on. And you can't take it as, well, that's how every leadership buy-in conversation is going to go. It's what can I take from it that I can apply moving forward? And I continue to reinforce and strive to stay on the win-win approach, and see it really as a longer-term, partnership and not just a transactional discussion. So thank you.
That's an awesome way to end your conversation. I agree totally with learning from experience. That's really important. Next, we have Chris Olson is the manager of organizational development at Chemical Bank. His responsibilities with Chemical Bank include overseeing the leadership development program, talent management curriculum, and corporate learning technology solutions. He brings 17 years of experience in the finance industry from 7 different banking organizations. 11 of those years were spent focusing specifically on learning and development. His expertise involved performance management, coaching and development, strategic planning, instructional design, LMS management, e-learning with authoring, facilitating instructor-led and virtual classroom trainings. Through his professional career, he also brings an eclectic background of performing in national touring indie rock bands, very cool, establishing a third wave coffee roasting company, and providing consulting for Michigan craft breweries. In addition to his roles at Chemical Bank, Chris's nonprofit work consists of serving on the board for ATD Detroit as their VP of Finance, and is also a board member of Build on Detroit, providing financial literacy to low-income housing districts. With that, Chris, are you ready?
Ready as I'll ever be. Boy, Alan's right. It does make you feel like your head's pretty big when you go through that long list of the bio there. So anyways, yeah, looks like you might have just also pushed out some polling questions out there. So if anyone's able to go ahead and respond to those, I'd be interested in the feedback. Basically, the first one is just if there's anyone on the call that's currently in the process of seeking leadership buy-in. And then the follow-up to that would be kind of your status and health of where you're at, where you feel, if you're confident that what you're achieving is going to be successful, or if you got some roadblocks or you think it's, just not going to pass, they're not going to see the light of day. Just kind of interested in everybody's response into that, see where we're at. And maybe we can talk about that as we go through it. And I'm not sure if you're able to, after we respond to that, I'm not sure, Nicole, if you're able to provide, there's a Word document I emailed, if you're able to share that with everyone, that I was going to try to talk through if you're able to do that.
I will bring that up.
Yeah, so I'll try to give it a little bit of a introduction here. So I think what Alan was touching on was a perfect segue for a lot of what I was going to speak about and kind of reinforce some of his ideas. The other thing too, with the Word document that she's able to bring up, I'm not sure if it's going to be made available for people to download or not, but you can feel free to reach out to me and email me, and I'll be happy to share it with you. So it's nothing overly proprietary, so I'm happy to share. But basically, it's going to be a document that we're beginning to use internally in our organization to help drive change, to basically give you a little bit of a guideline and roadmap as to how you can make whatever change, whatever business process improvement you want to implement in your organization, a little bit of training wheels and a little bit of a map and guideline for you to be able to achieve that. And it's going to help you communicate it. It's going to help you get the buy-in for it, not only with leadership, but others around you that can help support your decision process. So it's just kind of there to help articulate what you're trying to convey in order to gain that leadership buy-in from the powers that be in your organization. So at the start here, what I would say, I'm going to steal a little bit from Simon Sinek. He's famous for, his claim to fame is coming up with the book and concept of start with why. I think that's incredibly crucial in your process and trying to get leadership buy-in. He typically preaches to try and make it visual for people to be able to see the image in their head. Great examples of this, I would say Martin Luther King. He was able to verbalize something that people could picture in their minds. Martin Luther King's famous speech when he says, "I have a dream," and it goes on to say that I can picture a little black girl playing with a little white girl on a playground in America. It was something that people could see, and you got the idea and the goal and what you're trying to achieve. So the more you can do that, the better. I think Apple is another great example. The reason the iPod, I think, blew up the way it did is because they started out with 20,000 songs in your pocket. Like, you got that concept quickly and easily. You were able to visualize that and how amazing that is. And the more you can do that with the leadership, the more they're going to be likely to see the big picture and what you're going towards if you're able to visualize that. The other thing I would make and try to convey in your compelling purpose here of why you're doing what you're doing is tying it into what the overall organization's mission and vision and core values are. So sometimes, they might not see how it ties in, and that's what your role is going to be, is identifying where what you're doing, what you're trying to implement, and how that's going to work into the overall strategic mission of the organization, the mission, the vision of where the company is trying to go, and reinforcing those core values that the company stands for. So the more you're able to do that, you're going to be speaking the jargon of the leadership, and that's going to make them kind of associate a little bit more with what you're trying to achieve. So up at the top, that step one, as you're kind of developing that compelling purpose, practice that out. Write something out for yourself to see what that's going to look like. You can test it with people before you actually pilot it with others before you actually roll it out and communicate it to other members. And identify who your constituency is. Is it going to be a certain department? Is it going to be someone in the C-suite? Is it going to be someone underneath that C-suite? You need people to also support you in your decision before you present to the leadership. So kind of identify what that compelling reason is and what that compelling reason is going to be for your various members of your constituency so that they can help support you as you're trying to gain your leadership buy-in. The next step that we utilize here is the vision and agreement. So basically, this is where you can, take that positive vision that you're trying to articulate and being able to get the buy-in from the leadership in that next step. And basically, this is going to be identifying who really has the final say on the decision. Who's the owner that's actually going to be able to pull the trigger and give it the blessing in order for it to really take life. And find out how that decision is going to be made. Are you going to be telling people what they're going to be doing? Are you going to be asking input? Is it going to be a collaborative effort in order for that final say to happen? Do you need to make sure everyone agrees or just one party? And are you going to be handing off that decision making to someone else? Is it going to be kind of a delegative approach to this? So kind of work with who that leadership individual or group is and how you can anticipate what that decision is going to look like and how it's going to be made is going to be kind of helpful. So you can kind of identify the areas of which ones that you need to focus on. So what you need to do is figure out who can provide expertise and serve as an advisor to basically support your decision to the leadership group in case you need to form a partnership on that. How will we show people where we're going with that purpose so they can kind of, hear from the horse's mouth of like, for instance, we want to get into this market, whatever it is. I mean, we need a salesperson in that market, but it's new territory. We don't know how to get into this market. Let's say it's a very diverse market. Well, maybe if you hire someone within that community and bring them in, that will get you an entranceway into it versus spending a whole bunch of money on advertising where it won't be as effective. So you might have that might be something that is appealing to your leadership if they hear we have a much more lean and frugal way of entering into a market that would be more effective than simply throwing a lot of money at it. So those are the kinds of things where you can have people partner in and speak to it as to how why these decisions are going to be better decisions to be made. And so below that we have, and there's different terminology for this, you'll see. We have ensuring the vision includes these 4 essential elements. Sometimes people like to call it the levers of leadership. So these are the different things that you can pull on to try to entice them and get more buy-in. So you'll have the inspiring, that's basically your compelling why statement, making sure it's strategically sound. So making sure that there's financial sense to it, providing documentation and proof that there's accountability, that everything is going to be identified properly and that you're not nothing's going to slip through the cracks as you're trying to implement whatever you're trying to create change and get buy-in for. And then the last step for there is going to be being able to communicate that. So you have your appropriate people already identified and you have a communication plan so everyone's well informed, because sometimes when you make a change, it could be something small and you don't think has an impact, but next thing you know, you could upset a whole process or system that has a ripple effect that could go all the way up through the organization. Thirdly, here we have the step here to engage a small group or what we like to call a microcosm. And basically this is going to be your pilot group of individuals that you can identify that you could get feedback from before you make your presentation and pitch to the leadership for your buy-in. So that's pretty much literally as simple as it sounds. You just want to handpick good individuals that are going to give you a great feedback that's going to be constructive. You want to I would suggest finding people that are skeptical. Sometimes if you bring in a friend, someone you're close rapport with, they're going to just kind of, play along and tell you what you want to hear. Sometimes it's good to get people that you know are going to be skeptical and challenging, even though it's going to be a little bit tougher process. You're going to have a much better polished product when you know it's been flushed out from someone who really likes to nitpick and get down to the itty-gritty details. As we go down here further, there's a 4th step in the process. That is going to be communicating the change to everyone that's impacted, having an action plan for that change that's going to take effect. So basically that's to, again, communicate what that vision is so everyone understands it and everyone's able to work towards it. And that's going to also identify what the group needs to know in order to implement the change as well, what action steps are going to need to be taken. You might even consider having a leader involved in this group, a captain, to kind of head up and drive some of the change and making sure that what you're implementing is going to be successful. And then last step is going to be simply implementing the change. You kind of already have the planning process somewhat flushed out at this point as you go through those steps. And then you just pretty much do the details after that of setting the live date. When is this thing really going to launch and take life? Checking your schedules and dates to make sure that everything is going well. Building that trust, making sure that everyone's pitching in and that everyone's relying on one another. It might be good to make adjustments to basically have meetings where you can discuss where we're at to keep things agile, so that way you're not going too far off the map with what you're trying to achieve. And then lastly, celebrate, or close to the end here, celebrate. When you do have a victory, make sure that you are celebrating it, because you want to have that momentum and it's not going to stop there. If you have that success, you want to emulate that so that you can continue to bring more successes. It might be good to start with something very small in scale, basically something you know is going to be a quick win, so you can kind of get a little bit of momentum after that. So go for some low-hanging fruit. There's no shame in that. Go ahead and do that so that way you have something achievable that you can point at that, look at what this did, let's do more of that. And then that can increase and you'll build that trust the more with leadership buy-in as you're going forward with that, because you're going to get a little bit more of a rapport. They're going to see what you've done before in the past, and they'll be willing to go a little bit further and expand those boundaries of what you're looking to achieve. And then lastly, the document process, and that's really just a catch-all, so that way you can have some key actions and decisions throughout the process. What worked well, what didn't work well, how can we do things better? It's always good to go through a lessons learned process. So that's kind of a quick synopsis of one of the things that we're beginning to implement in our organization to help drive improvement and to kind of give a little bit of some training wheels to make a proposal for some business changes that want to take effect. Not just for HR, this is literally something organization-wide that we're planning on taking effect. And it can be any range of opportunities here. So it can be something very small as, making sure that all the doors in our branches have a doorstop. That actually could be something helpful with the lobby traffic that comes in and out. It's very weird when you don't, we're so far removed from those that are in the trenches that are trying to, make these suggestions that kind of don't get traction because they simply don't know how to articulate it. And this is kind of a tool that anybody can use at whatever scale. Sometimes when you're trying to make big initiatives like investing in a new software, we're currently going through that process right now. We're looking at developing some online content and bringing that on. Shopping vendors of lynda.com and Open Sesame and those kinds of providers. And we're not used to spending that kind of money. We're fresh off of a merger, and we have a whole new set of leadership where a lot of people don't know each other. And so we really need to have tools in place for us to be able to communicate with one another what we're trying to achieve and trying to show that purpose. So for that instance, we're taking the approach that there is an ROI to this, and that definitely speaks to the executive leadership's ears, is when there is going to be a return on investment. The amount of money that we spend on in-person training, the travel costs, the room fees, the food that's ordered, the mileage of people traveling in, it is very inefficient and minimally effective. And so when we're able to say, yeah, this software does cost this much money, but we have 9,000 training videos available 24/7 that we can provide reporting and analytics on, because it's all electronic and it's not manual. It's not people signing in personal sign-in sheets to a room, we can monitor that, and we're not spending money on trainers actually going out and conducting these trainings. It's just there waiting for them to take it. So when you see the cost of it, sure, there might be sticker shock, but look at what the cost is for the old process and the old ways and what we've been doing. there's great value in looking at this. So those are the kinds of things where you want to be able to provide a little bit of an ROI. It can be ballpark figures, just enough to get your point across, but that's going to also be kind of appealing to the leadership when you're working that out. Lastly, the one thing that I would mention here as well too, I would suggest, being that I would expect the majority of those on the call today are those that come from a learning and development HR background. So you probably have access to anything that your executive leadership might have done in the realm of strength finders, Myers-Briggs, the DISC self-assessments, color Q, 360 feedback data. That's all relevant data for you to go and look and review so that you can understand how you can communicate to those various individuals. So that's going to be, a little bit of leverage for you. It's not quite manipulation. We're not, Frank Underwood and House of Cards here, but this is helpful information for you to help find out what is going to really speak to those leadership executives that based on that data and information. We found that immensely helpful when we're trying to simply conduct just collaborative meetings. It also works for when you're trying to gain your buy-in as well too. So I would highly recommend going through and reviewing that data before you go and meet with whatever individuals or whatever group of individuals, because that's going to provide a lot of information for you to review. Alan was talking also about the emotional intelligence. So review your own information of what you are, where you're at with Myers-Briggs, and how you've been self-assessed. Now, these aren't silver bullets, and it doesn't answer all of life's questions, but it is helpful information that will help you self-identify and be aware of how you are perceived, and so you can know how you want yourself to be perceived with those based on their other data and information with their assessments. So you can find good, helpful ways to bridge that gap in your communication skills as well. So, the more you go through this, you're going to learn that it's not just science. It's not, a checklist of things, but there is going to be a lot of art to it. And I think that's where emotional intelligence, the more you're able to practice that, is really going to be able to help provide, how you're able to conduct and hold your conversations to making sure that they're constructive and that you're reaching towards the same goal and building those relationships, because that's really going to be the key. So it's really kind of a combination of art and science. It's not one or the other. It's going to be a blended approach of both is kind of what I've learned in my experience. So, and the one thing I would avoid, if at all possible, is that we're probably all very passionate about what we're trying to gain buy-in for. The passion part is good, but I would recommend leaving emotions, if you're able to filter emotions out, that is going to be a little bit more helpful. I don't think that in our experience, especially with executive bankers, emotional aspects kind of don't really get that far. We find it's more beneficial to speak in inspiring terms and positive terms, but not in the sense of emotions. So you want to make sure your passion comes through, but you want to kind of reserve yourself so that your own emotional aspect and connection to whatever it is you're trying to achieve kind of is a little bit filtered, and kind of give that a measured approach, because you really want to stick to the inspiring part, but not getting overzealous, because that has harmed people in the past in what we've seen, that the message gets lost and they feel that it's almost more of an emotional decision versus a strategically sound, mission critical decision. So that's kind of my experience and kind of some of the things that we're currently going through as an organization. So I hope a lot of this is helpful to you, and I'd be happy to see kind of what some of the responses are from the attendees in the group if they responded to the polling questions.
We received some responses. So we're at 71% are going through the process of seeking leadership buy-in for some type of idea or project, and 29% are saying no. And of those, it said of how confident are they? Nobody was very confident. The majority of the group is at 86% of somewhat confident, and 14% are not sure at all.
Interesting.
Very.
I'm not surprised to hear that. Unfortunately, I think that's probably why a lot of people are on the call, is because they're trying to look for advice and kind of, finding assistance and support in that. I would, what I would highly recommend also for the group is do as much research as you can out there. You're obviously taking steps today, reaching out to us and connecting with Nicole and taking the time for this. But benchmark data for what you're trying to achieve is going to be very helpful if you're able to compare with other organizations for what their best practices are and what their successes are and what you need to do to stay relevant and competitive in whatever your market is. We do that as well very constantly. That helps support the decision. It doesn't sell it, but it's going to help support that decision of why you're doing what you're doing and why it's critical and relevant that you do and that you don't get left in the dust, because we all know the rate of innovation and the rate of change that's taking place in our various markets. So the more benchmarking data that you can provide, that is also something that can be very helpful and could also speak to the language of your executive leaders.
Thank you. Next, we have Carmel Benson. She is a PhD, and she has developed Bay Area companies, or has helped Bay Area companies develop and engage employees and leaders for over 15 years. Her dissertation empirically validated that employees react much more positively to organizational changes under caring, passionate leaders, and when given the opportunity to provide input. Carmel has infused active organizational learning and ongoing buy-in throughout her leadership and organizational development work at companies like Cisco Systems, Genentech, Seagate Technology, Apple, Maxim Integrated, Logitech Integrated Device Technology, and most recently, Tibco Software. Her interactive, feedback-rich, and enthusiastic approach incorporates employee voices at all levels, resulting in solutions that are relevant, resonant, and innovative. Carmel received her doctorate in social organizational psychology from the University of California, Santa Cruz in 2002, and majored in French at Columbia University in New York City, where she was raised. A city girl originally, she prefers Santa Cruz, where she lives and surfs with her teenage children.
Thank you very much for that. And I apologize in advance because I think I might break Chris's rule and actually use some emotion in what I'm about to share. So apologies in advance. And I'd love your feedback if you find that it doesn't work. So we are going to talk about gaining leadership buy-in and how we go about doing that. And what I'm going to propose is that when we talk about gaining that buy-in, we really want to be thinking like marketers, because we're selling our idea. We're actually salespeople. We're pitching something. And that's why I'm actually proposing, with much respect to alternative perspectives, that we actually want to have that enthusiasm and have our real skin in the game and try to see where we can get those leaders to get some skin in the game too, and really try to read them and read where they are excited and where they're passionate, and try to really ignite that and follow that passion as well. Because we're really trying to understand the user experience, if you will. They are potential users of this idea. They're testing their own response to it. And so we want to think about what experience do we want them to have as we're, quote, gaining their buy-in. Do we want them to feel like we're trying to persuade them, or do we want them to be getting excited about how fantastic this opportunity is, both for them and how great they'll look, as well as how wonderful an opportunity it will be for their department and or the organization overall. I just came across something by a guy named David Brinker, who's a marketing expert I found online. And I love this because he talked about, he wasn't talking specifically about a leadership buy-in. I'm making that segue and that tie, but he talked about this idea of a marketer scientist. And he really emphasized that it's very important to be the storyteller, which we've heard from our other panelists as well. Be a champion, experiment, so really try to innovate. Be an experienced designer, so truly be that UX designer, understanding the experience, both of the leader and of the organization. And definitely a change agent, which we've heard about as well. So do you want to sell your idea? Because really, it is about the relationship. I think we all know, and we've kind of maybe even gotten tired of hearing about the relationship, but we need to keep talking about it because that's really what we're selling. We're selling feelings, and we're selling what the benefit is, and we're selling excitement about how much this will benefit both the leadership team as well as their constituents, the employees, and the organization overall, and the business. So understanding the context of the business and their concerns is key. Understanding the needs and understanding the culture too. So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to use a theme here throughout the rest of this presentation, if you will. And we're gonna go with the Wolf of Wall Street because it very much exemplifies, in of course less ethical ways than what we're trying to espouse, but still in a fun way, what we're trying to talk about, which is it's very, very key to know what you want and why, and to be crystal clear about your priorities. Because if we go into a leadership team asking for A through Z, we probably won't even get a period or an exclamation point, and we'll probably get a lot of question marks, which we don't necessarily want. But if we go in and we are laser sharp on what it is that we want out of this and why, and we're going to get into that more, we're much more likely to get what it is that we want, and ideally what we want is what we believe is best for the business. So how do we know what's best for the business? Well, because we have to understand what the leadership wants for the business and why. And as Nicole pointed out, I'm a big proponent of not just talking to leadership, but also getting a sense from employees at all levels, managers, frontline, senior, et cetera, what they believe is best for the company as well. Because that's where the buy-in comes in as well. Because if leaders just know that they care about something, but they don't know that employees and the company care about it, they might be less likely to be convinced and excited about the idea. So finding champions is very key. Finding champions, again, at all levels, certainly at the executive leadership level. Understanding those concerns. So Chris talked about finding those skeptics and those cynics, and I fully agree, because that's how you understand potential concerns. Why is it important to understand those concerns? Is so that you can then address them. I understand if you can share those concerns before other people even bring them up, you're going to impress them even that much more, that you fully have your handle on the business. You understand what's important to the business, not just what we want in our L&D ivory tower. So asking questions. Asking questions is a mantra here at TIBCO and within our learning and org development group. Why do we ask questions? Because that's how we're going to understand what they want. While we ask questions, we're not just going to listen to their answers. We're going to watch their reaction. We're going to look at the interaction between them. We're going to look at the eyebrows raised as they look at each other around the room, observing very, very keenly, and then summarizing back what we hear. Now, this doesn't mean I'm making it sound like it's potentially in one meeting. It certainly isn't. This is through as many types of interactions and relationships as you can build. So this is one-on-ones. This is over coffee. This is a quick chat in the hallway, as well as the more formal meetings too, because it's very, very important that we offer value. And the more people we talk to, and the more we hear, and the more we know, the more likely we are able to offer value and get them excited about what we're suggesting. And then we do it again. This is a cycle that kind of never ends throughout the entire process. Even once we've launched, we've successfully convinced them and gotten their buy-in and launched it, we still continue to do this. So again, as a reminder, we're not progressing. For some reason, my slide, there we go. As a reminder, we definitely need to know what we want and why. By talking to them, we'll crystallize more. We'll hone in even further on what. So this again, getting this information from them, both in terms of words and in terms of interactions and relationships, is how we're better able to then hone in on what it is that we need and want from them in terms of buy-in. So a big key is to focus on the what's in it for them. When we say for them, we mean for the leaders themselves individually as a team, but also as leaders of the organization that they lead. So truly for the greater good as well. When we come across a solution, when we know that we've got their buy-in, we need to run with it. Because often we've been in situations, I have certainly, where the leadership says, okay, they're gung-ho, they're excited, they're on board, they're ready to even throw the money in. And then HR, for example, might say, well, hold on, there's too much going on in the business, we don't have the resources to support, and we pause. When we go back to leadership a month or two later, everything might have changed. The business might be in a different situation, we might have different budgetary constraints, so carpe diem, seize the day would be another bit of advice. So in summary, to gain leadership buy-in, my proposal is that you've got to know what you want and why. understand what they want and why within the context of the business, within the context of what employees need as well. So that's data that you're bringing to them as well. I know the other panelists have talked about data. Revisiting back and forth what it is that you're trying to achieve and why, and how that plays into what it is that they want, what the tie-in between what you're trying to sell and what they care about, what that tie-in is. And therefore focusing on the what's in it for them, for the company, the leadership, the team. And then finally striking when the iron's hot. And if we do all these things, then everybody wins and has a fantastically wonderful party. And of course, I'm joking, but it really does become something that's truly, truly a win-win for the leadership team, for us as L&D professionals, and really for the business, which is really what it's all about. So thanks for that.
Awesome. So now I'm going to open it up to the group. I think that we had some great perspectives there. Does anyone in the audience have questions for any of the panelists? And while we're waiting for some questions to come in, there aren't any that are queued up. From the panelists, is there anything more you want to contribute now that you've heard the others speak?
I would just add that once you have one win in terms of that buy-in, it's just going to make it that much easier the next time because you've gained that credibility.
Alan, great roadmaps from both Chris and Carmel about that I think are applicable not just in our professional lives, but I think we sharpen our saw and hone our skills in applying some of these things in our personal lives as well. And can't wait to get the document, Chris, that you put together, along with you know, a few 6-packs of beer from the breweries that you work with. But just the whole thought process and what you were presenting, Carmel, to see as you're talking about this. One last thing that popped into my mind, kind of a closing comment that I think is also helpful, and this requires two things: courage and consideration. Is in the book by Levitt and Dubner, Think Like a Freak. They talk about well, and it's 2 different sets of words, but one, the probably 3 most difficult words for people to say, and your initial reaction would be, I love you, you know, as the 3 hardest words. The reality is, especially in a business setting, because it takes so much courage and consideration, but is equally important, is the ability to say, I don't know. And we don't have answers to everything in the moment. And when trying to obtain leadership buy-in, especially at the upper level, if we don't have the answer in the moment, it can cause us a lot of angst and consternation, but you actually will build your credibility by simply saying, I don't know. And of course, everybody knows this, following it up with, I will find out, I'll discover, I'll uncover, and things like that. But you can't be afraid to say that, because if you try and story sell your way through it, and it's not fact-based, you know, maybe Sam, story assumption math, they're probably going to see right through it. So don't be afraid to say, I don't know. And then the other part about that is the last word in that, except for spelled a little differently. Don't be afraid to say no. I've had some successful wins obtaining leadership buy-in when they asked me to go down one path, and I said no. I had to have the business case as to why I didn't agree with their approach, and was able to prove in the end that the approach that we took instead was a win, not to show them up. But those are 2 things that I think are also equally helpful as you obtain the leadership buy-in, is sometimes you got to say no, and sometimes you got to say, I don't know. How your culture is receptive to those 2 things is important here. So you need to know your culture. But at the same time, I find that they're very effective tools because we don't have all the answers all of the time.
I love it. You definitely have to learn from your experience. We do not have a very chatty audience today. If you have any questions, please share them now. We have just a few more minutes to address any questions that you have. I do know that each of you shared a very thorough perspective, and I love the way that your personalities and your styles have really interacted. I think you've blended really well.
Thanks very much for putting this together, Nicole. It was very fun and very helpful to hear Chris and Alan's perspective too.
I think with the conversations that I've had with people, is they were really good with the people component, you know, gaining the trust and the collaboration within their teams, or addressing the ideas and knowing how to really put that together as a package. but they were missing some components. Like they weren't able to blend it with that return on investment, those numbers that they needed to do that market research, or they were missing that collaboration part. I do have a question that just came in. It was submitted anonymously. What is the greatest pitfall or watch out when obtaining the leadership buy-in?
I would say not relating it to the business needs, not understanding the business, and therefore not relating it to business needs.
I second that.
Alan?
Well, since we have a quiet crowd, it's a result of one thing. I left them dumbfounded, and Chris and Carmel left them speechless. So I will just agree. But no, that's absolutely correct. You build your credibility by tying it back to the business. What's the problem solved for? And if you can't tie it back to a business need or goal, it's probably not worth pursuing. So I agree wholeheartedly. Absolutely.
Yep. Tying it across each level is very important.
Yep.
Well, I appreciate each of you, Chris, Alan, and Carmel, for taking the time to speak with everyone today, and I appreciate the attendance from everybody in the audience. I'm just going to invite you to enjoy our next event, which is Empowering Employees to Learn, helping with that self-direction and really inspiring them to take those extra steps to really grow themselves, either in their current position or as they're moving forward within the company that they currently work with or in their career.